Still Life 2 is a 2009 point-and-click adventure game that was published by Microids, like the previous games in the series, but now developed by Gameco Studios. As I loaded up the game for the first time, I was immediately greeted by a loud and thumping new soundtrack in the menu. That gave me a sense of optimism. That optimism was short-lived though, as the opening cinematic takes you on an epic voyage of déjà vu. Initially, I thought I was replaying the previous game, as the same music and scenes from the opening cutscene of that game assaulted my senses. I guess it served as a recap for the previous game's events, but still, it seems rather lazy and set me up for around 14 hours of monotony. The game continues with you playing as one of the previous game's main characters, Victoria McPherson, who is this time chasing after the East Coast gas mask fetishist. Sorry, the East Coast killer.
Another one of the killer's victims. Not even rodents are safe.
Although at times you'll also be digging over the old story from the previous game. In time, you'll also get to play as a reporter called Paloma Hernandez, who gets kidnapped by the killer. It's Victoria's job to help free Paloma before she gets killed, something that is complicated by the fact that they are not exactly best buddies. It goes without saying that, like the other games in the series, this game is quite adult in nature.
These look like drops of blood. Or tomato juice, I guess. But for some reason I'm leaning toward the first theory.
Most of the game takes place in the same location, a derelict mansion out in the woods, with more areas of the house becoming explorable as you progress through the game. There are plenty of hidden away areas to make it at least semi-interesting to explore, but it does feel a little bit repetitive after a while when you revisit those areas again and again.
Nice shack. A bit morbid, but it's got style.
One of the few areas of the game that isn't located there is Paloma's apartment, which is now a crime scene. Here, we're given an array of fancy gadgets to use called the CSIA kit.
The what?
With this, you're able to test various objects found and perform various forms of analysis on them. It adds some depth to Vic's FBI role, although at times it can be a little clunky to use.
It's not this.
The same could be said for the poor inventory system, where you end up having to go back and forth to swap items around, since you'll often have no space left for something else that is more important. Annoyingly, you're given no idea which items will continue to be needed, so you won't know which ones you can just get rid of. To make matters worse, the game is also picky about the orientation of items too, making you move everything else around just so an item can fit. It doesn't help that many sections of the game are timed, and I've had to go all the way back through a number of areas with barely enough time left, such as when I had to get an antidote for a snake bite. To add to the lack of variation, there is a similar section where you have to get another antidote for some poison that the killer has injected you with, but this was fairly simple and it was a game of trial and error, rather than following any logic. There is also another time section late on in the game where I ran out of inventory space, and I had to use up a health pack just to get an item to fit in the inventory. Some inventory actions, such as combining items, can be logical, although for every logical action there will be another where you're left wandering around with no clue of what goes together. There are also times where you have to stand in just the right position to first trigger dialogue, and only then can you complete an action. To add to that, not only do we have normal pixel hunting, we have a new form of pixel hunting. Pixel hunting with a metal detector. Yes, this new feature has 4 levels of strength, so when you're scanning over the ground with a detector, you may have to do it on each strength level before you find an item. That means 4 times the pixel hunting fun. Oh joy!
The funniest thing is that you seem to believe what you're saying.
Regarding the puzzle aspects of the game, it's sad to think that the most memorable puzzle was one that annoyed me the most. This was where you were given a partial clue to the code of one of the doors in a bunker, with the first and last number mentioned during the conversation. I initially assumed that maybe the middle part of the code was related to various dates when Paloma conducted interviews, but I was wildly off. From a second clue, we're told that Paloma and Victoria, along with other targets of the killer, were assigned character names, and that the surnames of these are connected with the code. From that, you're supposed to then make the leap that only the numbers 1 to 9 relate to certain letters in the alphabet, bearing in mind that the keypad goes from 0 to 9, and also has the letters A to D. I was completely baffled.
Oh, my head is spinning. I feel strange.
Most puzzles aren't quite that complex, but still require you to hunt around a bit for clues, which can be quite tedious if you don't know where to look, and annoying if you're up against a timer. There are some conventional and logical puzzles, such as when I needed to set the voltage of an electric chair. In this case, there were different doors with numbers and names, and I simply used the number associated with Paloma's name. But by halfway through the game, I'd got that tired of the time sections and hunting for clues that I was almost entirely working off of a guide.
His traps are more and more elaborate. I'm starting to miss good old stretched wires.
A basic hint system can be accessed via Vic's smartphone, which is also where you'll find objectives, but this is often limited in the help it provides. Maybe I just need a little bit more patience. There are very few characters in the game, with some returning from the previous one, but they mostly have very limited development. Character models vary in quality, but are mostly subpar for a 2009 game. The voice acting is also a mixed bag, which goes along with the dialogue.
I'd rather not imagine what might have happened on this table.
It's really amateur stuff. I should be able to do better.
And poor animation work makes characters move stiffly, with things not always matching up, along with some minor clipping issues when walking around. The pre-rendered cutscenes actually do look quite decent, and I can only wish that the rest of the game looked as good, as a lot of the texturing is quite low resolution, and combined with some poor lighting, it can occasionally make it easy to miss things. The use of music in the game isn't the greatest, with dramatic bursts of music starting at key events, and sometimes random. It is often played so loudly that it drowns out any dialogue.
The bodies of the condemned are brought to execution. That's the protocol. We mustn't deviate from it.
For the most part, it's completely forgettable. The only thing I remember is the menu music. Apart from the minor clipping issues, the game is practically bug-free, and a big improvement on the previous one, which struggled with Windows 10.
I had to kick it hard, but it worked.
Unfortunately, while it was nice to play without the bugs that the previous game had, this sequel has none of the depth, variety and interest of that game, and so overall I felt it was a poorer effort. Decent pre-rendered cutscenes, and being able to save anywhere are some of the few positives that Still Life 2 has, while being repetitive, going over old ground in terms of the previous game's story. Uninspiring puzzles, poor inventory design and some annoying time tasks mean that there are more negatives. The story does conclude acceptably, with a few twists and turns to spice things up near the end, and there are moments where some of the blanks of the previous game's ending are filled in too, but overall it doesn't feel fresh enough, and it concentrates too much on one setting. If you like the previous games, then it's definitely worth completing the series, but it's certainly not a game I'd ever bother to replay again.
Please, I'm begging you. Let me go. I won't tell anyone what's happened.
On that note, thank you for watching, and please leave a comment below. Goodbye.
Hurry up and get me out of here.